Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio. You are about to join a frequency that will open your mind, expand your heart, and activate your spirit. Thank you for joining Kelly Meehan, Spirit Baby Medium and Master Energy Therapist. Kelly believes in the power of the Spirit Baby. She speaks with babies in spirit before life, in the womb, and after life. She supports, teaches, and guides others to tune into the intuitive and mystical parts of life for greater wisdom. Join her in meeting your soul baby and build your connection and relationship with deep love and trust. Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio with your host, Spirit Baby Medium, Kelly.
Welcome to episode 139, May 27, 2022, Awakening Through the Energies of Life and Death, a Birth Keeper's Journey. What true lived experiences between worlds are in collaboration? What does a birth and death keeper do? How can healing transform the past, present, and future? I have a special guest, and I'm smiling because I always go into my special guests, and I mostly know most of them, which there's a reason for that. I feel like energy is energy. And I have Leticia. Hello.
Hello. So happy to be here with you.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm going to read her little bio here. Leticia Leyva is a mother to her son Malachi Ra and her daughter in light, whose souls roam free amongst the stars. Her purpose work in this life is as a radical birth keeper, postpartum caretaker, holistic death keeper, guardian of grief, intuitive astrologer, and overall portal dweller, whose mission on earth is to serve love in the highest as a keeper of the sacred. Oh man, take that in. And I love here, we go way back. I mean, I make it sound like, but I don't remember the moments as we met. I know that it was through the loss of Malachi. And the thing that really I want to share, I remember you saying, is that your community or your family was concerned about your emotional, spiritual state. And then we connected, and I've been honored and gifted by Leticia's energy to meet with her in a group of ladies monthly, which has been just incredible. And I thought it's so fitting to have you here, as I've from afar watched you grow in just such profound ways. It's like you're like different people, right? It probably feels like that. And so I want to hear more about you and the this work that you're doing now.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that beautiful intro. And I definitely remember how I came to you, of course, that, in those early days of grief after my firstborn son was born still full term, I was searching on the internet, for exactly what you offer, like a group of spiritually connected women who have walked a similar journey in this lifetime to connect with. And also, like you mentioned, my mom in particular was just really wanting to support me with some type of therapist support. And I was clear that I didn't want just an average talk therapist. I wanted something deeper that really resonated. And so I found you. I don't know if I first found you through Facebook or just on an internet search, but I was really, whichever way the chronological sequence of events happened, I found your website and the Facebook group and just really resonated and was so grateful to find, that you offered this grief mentorship, I think is what you called it at that time. I don't know if that's still what it's called, but I was like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And also because I was looking for the somatic piece of it to help move that grief energy. And I think we messaged back and forth and you told me about that. So that was so beautiful and just so deeply resonant. And, it's been a journey. So it's been, I just passed the 2nd year mark of Malachi's birth and death on May 8th. So it's been a big journey of self-discovery in these past 3 years, really, because, becoming pregnant with him was a huge part of all of that. And I really feel that his soul as my greatest teacher and spirit guide has led me into my true purpose work. There was things along the way that I had hints to. I've always been connected to children and always loved to caretake children in different ways, but never really had like come across the idea of being a midwife or a doula until when I was doing my yoga teacher training. Actually, one of my teachers had told me, you would make a great doula. I was like, oh, wow, that's so sweet. And I don't even think I knew what a doula was at that time, to be honest. And that was kind of the first seed planted. And yeah, it was like through the simultaneous like birth and death of my son that I had cleared so much space in my life for motherhood, because that's all I've ever wanted since I was a little girl. You know, when people ask you, what did you dream of wanting to become when you were little? And I was like, oh, a mother. Like I was always clear I wanted to be a mother, and always caretaking friends and cousins and whoever, really. And so when I finally became pregnant, it was like, wow, it's really time. Like I dreamt of this my whole life, you know? And then it felt like to have the experience of a full term loss, to like go all the way and then still be like, it's not quite your time, is such a deep journey of like trust and surrender. And yeah, just all the things any woman who's walked this path can relate to. But after Malachi didn't come through the portal, I had a great sense of peace, because I feel like he is a very strong communicator beyond the way of like actual language, right? Like the sign of like omens or some symbols, you know. I had lots of information communication from him, communicating before his birth and death that he like that this was always going to be our story. So I had a lot of peace around it in those early days, which also was hard for a lot of people. They just like couldn't quite understand it. And I get it, because they didn't have that same peace, because they didn't have that same communication to like prepare their soul on a deeper level, you know? And anyways,
Go ahead. No, you share something really important, to interrupt you, because I know others are like tuning in and connecting, and I always joke and I say you're a very strong empath. Your empath connection is very strong and very accurate, very connected. And so you're feeling and sensing into your son in pregnancy, which is understandable, and you're having that communication, and then you're going through that portal between life and death, and then, you know, almost like the presence of you is teaching others like what that's like. And even from that pregnancy perspective, a lot of women will struggle with like, oh, I'm in communication with my baby, I don't even know what that means. But when you have it, it's its own thing. Like you said, it's like a language of energy and communication, or signs and symbols, right? And then, but I just love the way you just said that. It just to me it was like, oh yes, it's so clear. And why I wanted to just spotlight is because I know others may be feeling like, oh yeah, like am I allowed to even trust that? What's that connection? And it's okay to have fear in it too, right? It's like, because when you're moving in between, not knowing, right? It's like when you're going to birth, there's so many unknowns, right? And yet there's supposed to be, I feel like, right? I mean, there really is. And someone actually just recently connected with me who is, I think she's having her third or fourth, and she's going back and forth between all these different things. And she messaged me about like loss, and she's like, I was scared that maybe I would lose my baby in birth. And let's even talk about that, because a lot of people will, here's what I've heard, and I want to hear what your perspective is on this. So I know that, you know, the fear of death of birth is very common. I feel like it's very common, even with people that maybe had no loss, maybe think about it, right? And it's something that comes up, and we tend to go, oh, let's put that away, let's not look at it. But maybe it's more of like, it's okay to feel that way, right? The permission, but not to dwell on it either, obviously. I feel like there's a balance. And so what I've heard someone say to me one time, or it was like, I think it was an article, I can't remember, but it really was impactful, because I was like, is this really true or not? And they said, and the woman said, well, when you've had loss, the energy around it, of fear of death of baby is going to be stronger, which yes, we know. But she said, but then my question is, what if you didn't have any loss and you still have that really major big fear of death? right? And so
Right.
what she was saying was, I felt like in her words was like, you're only going to have fear if you've had death before. But I was
Mm-mm.
like, but I know myself, and I've shared this before, especially with my first and my second. I thought about death before they were born too, and I was like,
Of
oh my gosh.
course.
So then I told myself, right at the time, oh, I'm not supposed to do that because that's not what you're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to do. You're not supposed to
Mm-hmm.
think that. Then I started to think, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. I'm thinking that way. But
Mm-hmm.
then I realized, especially with the firstborn, because there's so much, oh my gosh, I don't
Yeah.
know. And then I
Right.
was like, and then I have to take it back to my own birth. I go,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's the foundation because I was born through grief with my mom, with losing her
Mm-hmm.
brother, and I was born in a very traumatic way. And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like my first start into birth was not good. And so I have that trauma, and I have a grieving mother, and then she
Mm-hmm.
also had loss. I feel like, and this is my thought, is that those experiences is what made me in my own pregnancy feel a stronger connection to death with my children.
Sure.
What is your
Yeah. Well, first off, like as we're relating back to like the whole overarching theme of this conversation of what it is to be a birth keeper, like one of the first and most important things, my mentors taught us um to being really a true woman's like wise woman support is you have to talk about death. Death is always on the table for any of us, but especially in birth, when that portal opens, death happens, whether it's on like a material realm, physical level, but there's always the death of the maiden, right? So we have to acknowledge that death energy that is present in birth, regardless of how it manifests.
mm,
And I actually would be shocked to hear of a woman who didn't consider the possibility of death in pregnancy, because for me, I feel like it's a given. I feel like every woman touches that space, and it's a disservice to women and to life to not acknowledge it, because that's what's got us to where we are in the world today, where we so fear death when it's the only guarantee in this life, right? It's such a interesting way we've woven ourselves as humans on the planet right now to like fear the thing of like that great transformation of death so deeply that we don't see the beauty of it, and we don't like coming into nature. I always look to nature
mm,
as the ultimate for all the answers, right? And death always feeds life. Like that's just part of the natural cycle, right? You have to have that compost, that darkness, that in order to create that fertile ground for new life to spring forth. And so the death energy is always present in pregnancy and in that space of bringing life forth, because there is simultaneously a death happening. Again, like the death of the maiden for that woman that's transforming into the mother, or the death of old stories. And, pregnancy is such a deep time of healing on a physical, like physiological, visceral level, but also like energetically, spiritually, things that happen for this mother, this baby, this ancestral line is so beyond what we can even begin to touch the surface of. And there's so many beautiful stories of this. But part of like acknowledging our mortality helps us appreciate the preciousness of life, right? And so yeah, like we do go there, we do, and it's not a problem. I don't know why we've gotten to this place
mm,
where it's like, no, you can't talk about death, you can't acknowledge that there's a fear that you might lose your baby. Of course that's present, because you're holding life, and women are the keepers of life and death within our bodies, within the portals of our wombs. We are the keepers of life and death. Every cycle we go through that, right?
mm,
The possibility of life with ovulation, and then the
mhm,
death with menstruation and the blood. It's we're constantly in that cycle, but we've just lost touch with that and the beauty of it too. There's all this fear because we haven't actively engaged it and come to dance with it and meet it. And it's okay, it's not a problem to have fear, right? Like
mhm,
it's important to name it and to speak to it so that we can move through it. And also so you can get really clear. Like, that's what I see my role as a birth keeper. That's on the table. First conversation when working with a family is, how do you feel? Like, how do you feel about death? We need to talk about it, right? Like, if your baby was to pass, where would you want to be? Right. And how would you want to respond? Because it's a variation of where people are at. And again, it's not a problem. It's just to acknowledge where someone's at and to really, truly respect that sacred time, right? Of bringing life in or ushering life out. And sometimes it's simultaneous, like in my case, right? I thought I was bringing life into this world, and really I was ushering it out. As like that simultaneous, like giving birth to death was just like such a profound initiation for me. And obviously I understand much deeper now why that is, being this, as they call it, portal dweller and a birth keeper and death keeper, you know? And so, yeah, I think it's so important to normalize that feeling for women, and not just women, their partners, their mothers, their friends who have these fears, because especially a woman who is like going against the grain of what's normal in our modern society and stepping out of outsourcing her power into a higher authority and choosing to take full responsibility, because that's, stepping outside the medical paradigm in this day and age is really deep self-responsibility, and saying, I am the ultimate authority over my birth and choosing what I feel to be best for myself and my baby. And again, it's not to shame anyone who chooses different. It's just to acknowledge where someone's path might lead them, and to get super clear that in taking full responsibility, you're saying, I am choosing this no matter what, right? You have to be so clear. Like, if my baby were to pass, and this is the point I got to, if my baby were to pass, I would want to be home in that sacred space of my own home with familiar sounds and smells. And likewise, bringing new life into this world, that's where I want to be. So for me, it was like, that's how I got to that place of deep self-responsibility. And that's what I feel is my responsibility as a birth keeper when coming to a pregnant family, to really help them unearth and get clear on where they lie. And again, talking about death is on the table from the very start, because it has to be. It's always a possibility, right? Because we don't know, we don't have the privilege of deciding who gets to live and die. That's beyond our human capacity, but we do have the privilege of witnessing it and holding space for it and honoring a family's wishes for how they wish to experience such a massive transformation of, going through that portal and bringing life through or ushering life to the other side, right? Because that's really what death is it's a rebirth into the next realm, into the next dream. And I think go ahead.
No, you've said some really great things. I'm like, oh, I want to talk about that and that and that. I don't have a notebook this time. I'm like, I'm just gonna remember it. I'm like, my eyes are closed, listening, because kind of reversing back to even, I think it's such an amazing service to be able to talk about it. And I'm trying to remember with my first birth. So it was like 11 years ago. So I don't remember. I think death may have been mentioned. But there were some things that weren't mentioned, like even cesarean births and stuff, which probably should have been mentioned. So there was a lot of red flags, I realized at this point. And then the second time, of course, now my flags I'm like, okay, we're talking about death and cesarean. We're talking about all these things. Not that I ended up into a cesarean, but I almost did. But I wasn't resourced fully on what that really even meant, right? It wasn't in my birth plan, whatever that is.
Totally.
It just didn't exist in there. So. And so the death piece, I remember in the second birth, there was something on the paper with the midwives, like, if baby dies, what does that mean? Or I don't remember how they worded it, but I was like, am I supposed to write an essay about this? I was like, do I talk about it? And I felt like, for me, and especially in the second, I had those thoughts that came up. And then, I don't remember us really talking about it, but I do think that even really good midwives and doulas, they still get really scared. I mean, you probably
Of
see that a lot
course.
too.
Of
And
course.
but you have been initiated into something really deep. It's almost
Hmm.
feel like there's like a glowing light of symbol around you that like not that you have permission to speak about it, but it
Mm,
just it brings the I don't know, it's like in your bones and in your reality in such a deep way to
hmm.
bring that in, which just makes sense is why you'd be the birth and the death keeper. And we were talking about that earlier before we recorded. I was like, I can really feel that for who you are, and
Mm,
it feels like a balance, really. It's like you're not one or
mm.
the other. You're literally like there's that balance. And you said something too about there is death all the time, right? I mean, there
Right.
is not just people, but even with plants and leaves and
Sure.
sun and that is really powerful. Even something that came to my mind, which I've done past episodes on, is like postpartum death, or I call it postpartum depression. It's like
Mm,
that to me, there's like a death because
hmm.
the old person's got to die, and it
Right.
can be very fucking intense, right? I cursed him. It's
Absolutely.
okay. But it's like it's so intense because it's not. I'm not going to say it like oh whatever. And then I do feel like a lot of that after when women go into not to go too much in that when women go into that is because they're not cared for enough and no one is letting them die to be reborn, right?
Or
We need
witnessing them.
witnesses, yeah, witnesses, and cared for in that way to me feels really powerful. And I saw that with my first birth. I went
Hmm.
into depression. I was not in a blue
Mm,
period. It was depression full on. I was
mm,
just imagining ways to die, and I'm like,
mm.
this is not normal. I
No.
literally was in the rocking chair holding my baby going, I need to die. And I'm like, why am I thinking this way? I was crying and I was like, I don't. And then I was like, what if I just leave the baby and go somewhere? I mean, it was really, I
Mm,
had this like, yeah. And then I realized the death of that reality and not having my mother and father, they were just not
mm.
emotionally and fully equipped to be present, like at all, even physically in the space. Like there was nothing. And I was like, I felt
Right.
like there was a huge like heartbreak in that. And it was more than I realized because now I have this little child, which I felt like I don't know how to take care of him. What am I going to do with him? There's nobody in the village. Nobody's
Exactly.
taking
The
care of
grief
me.
of missing the
Yes.
village. Yeah,
And
and this is
I know that's
such
your
a
big,
huge thing.
yeah, that's a big thing, what you teach a lot and connect with. And so that even that's a level of death, right? It's like,
Hmm.
and I mean, it could be a level of death in a scary way, as we do know. As far as I know, the stats, I don't know if they've changed in America, especially that postpartum mother, death and baby death is pretty high for developed country, is what I last, heard about, which means
Yes.
that women aren't being taken care of after. And we do know that in America. You go in other countries, I know some women I know that are in like Denmark, Sweden area, they just you automatically get postpartum care. There's no like you have to do anything special. It's just automatic, right?
Exactly. And that's how it's always been, right? And that's
Yeah.
like where,
Yes.
and that's a big part of like where my current energy is focused. I'm in the innate traditions postpartum care provider training with Rochelle Garcia Saliga, and her whole mission on earth is to help reorient us all to understand that the health of mothers is the health of humanity. And
Oh, that's big.
it
Wow.
is, I mean, because exactly what you're speaking to is a reflection of like everything that's happening on the planet,
Mm,
and that like the health of our earth mother, the health of our actual mothers is reflective of the health of all of humanity, because we all come from the mother, right? We
mm,
all come from the mother. And like you're saying, like even in third world countries, they often have better postpartum care because it's still rooted in their traditions,
mm,
because as our divine design innate blueprint, like we knew instinctively, like the whole community gathered around a new mother and her new child because that is the future for us all, right?
mm.
And we have to caretake the mothers in order for all of us to be happy and healthy, because they are the center of the family, always, always.
Mm,
And it's such a beautiful sacred time to hold that mother, and because she's a newborn mother, I think that's also the other like reorienting we need to understand. It's not just a newborn baby, and in our modern
mm,
society it's so much excitement about the baby and everyone wants to hold the baby, and that's not actually what is best for that mother or that baby. The best thing you can do for a newborn mother is feed her, is oil her body, is keep her warm, is keep her house clean, is tend to the older children for her so she can stay in bed and rest with her baby and nurse and be skin to skin, right? And like, yeah, of course, she needs the baby held for a little bit to take a shower, to, you know, tend to herself for like moments. But, you know, a lot of people like want to see the baby right away and want to come into the postpartum nest and talk and hang out or expect to be entertained. And it's like, no, this mother needs caretaking herself. She needs to be mothered, right? We need to mother the mother so she can mother her baby so that her family can be healthy and thriving. And I also want to not leave out the fathers in this because they are often the most under-resourced in all of this, right? In the postpartum time, because Rochelle talks about like, we all need 2 layers of support, right? Again, looking to nature. In pregnancy, in utero, the baby has 2 layers of support within the belly, the amnion and the chorion. Okay. And so then when the baby's born, the baby has 2 layers of support, hopefully with the mother and the father. I know that's not always present, but this is like the divine design, right? This is the innate blueprint. Or, and so then the mother needs 2 layers of support, which is oftentimes her partner, but then she needs that second layer, like maybe her mother or a postpartum care provider or a friend, or, you know, and this is where the village comes in, because then the father needs 2 layers of support, because normally before the baby comes, the mother and the father are resourcing each other, right? Energetically, spiritually, emotionally. But then when the baby's born, all the mother's time, energy, and resource goes to mothering the baby. And the father can no longer be resourced by the mother. So he needs 2 layers of support, which often men don't even have 1 layer of support.
Wow. So
right.
true.
And so that's like, in all the different circles I'm a part of, this is a really present topic right now about, you know, the fathers and the men and how they have been harmed arguably more by the patriarchy than women, because at least we still have our like innate desire to gather as women and come together to talk about this and figure it out. And we have that. It's just innate in us to gather and to resource one another. But men don't have that. I mean, hopefully that's shifting, right? That's the prayer and the vision, is that they're coming together to gather more. And I know there's a lot of really beautiful brothers who are doing this work, but it's so painfully common that they don't have any support and they're left floundering. And then again, it just comes back to this whole where we are currently and how do we move forward from here to support healthy, thriving life, right? Because what we're living in right now is a death culture, a culture that fears death and that is oriented around death and not life, right? Like the way society is structured is not oriented to support life. It's not.
It's interesting to like look at that perspective. I didn't really think of that, but it's so true.
It's very deep. And again, this is all a lot of what Rochelle's work is in the world. And she speaks to this very beautifully and eloquently. And I just feel grateful to be able to mirror this back because it's so important. And it resonates deeply because we're all in it. We all feel it. We're all living it and trying to find our way back towards orienting towards life, right?
Almost like there's, to me, there's like an over poisoning and over developing over, let's go knock things down, like, and then, you know, you would, you'd be so proud, Leticia. I did an ancestral session and like, that's like, I feel like your energy. I'll tell you about it later. But I had one for myself yesterday and I've never, you know, and one of the things that came up as something I felt like that you were sharing is when I went back a lot of generations, it was beautiful. It was like, I saw one generation that there was a basket of wheat and the air was beautiful. The sun was great. The earth was nice. And then I can see where this dark line, it almost felt like a line of energy of over-industrialization. We have technology. Right. And it just like shredded and ruined and it disconnected people, disembodied people, and then all the more murderous, conniving. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like you can see. And then I'm going, wow, you know, we were going back to the ancient ones, is what she called them. And like they were like so different, and how they're still connected to us, but how I've seen in one of my lines, they literally put a dam, like a wall, like a brick wall between that. Like it doesn't, like it's all industrialization and conniving and like shisty. And I was like, what is this? So it's like, and then that whole reality, and then coming back to it, I know a lot of people right now, I know actually a lot of friends that are getting into gardening and they never gardened before ever. And I think there's something very instinctual about that.
Yes.
And maybe a little bit of fear too. Maybe a little bit of fear. That's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That's getting you there. Yeah.
Tending to
but
the
it's
earth,
like,
you know, same.
Again, it's like we know the earth has been damaged way before us, but of course, you know, but like you were saying, it's like even the postpartum, like, you know, the mother's the center, and what are we doing with her? Like there's no regard for her. Like she's literally the portal of life and death. And even, I mean, you know, this whole conversation, I've said it in many podcasts, even about hospital care, is like, it's poor. It's like, it's a problem to give birth. It's a disease to give birth. It's a sickness to give birth. There's nothing. And then you have to sit and go, oh my gosh, like birth is like, you're literally, this is a human life from it. Like this, this is big. And no one thinks of that. It's just, no, it's dangerous. We got to go get it out. Get that baby out, like something's wrong, or we got to manage it. And it's like, and this is, that's the reality I don't want to see a lot of. And this is why I home births as well. And I had a home birth with the first transfer, and that's a whole book, because it was a very ugly story that happened because of the way I was treated in the hospital. People hear my story and they're like shocked. I was like, yeah, because that's how you're going to be treated. When you talked about even responsibility for my own being, like that was so powerful when you talked about that. It's like we are responsible to go, this, I want a hospital birth, or I want a home birth, or I want an unassisted birth, or I want a midwife. Like we deserve, and we should have, to be able to make those decisions. Or I want, like somebody passes in my family, I want my home funeral, I want it in my home. I don't want embalming. Like we're allowed to do
natural
those things.
Death.
Yes. Like birth and death. Yeah.
Right. And there's a couple of really important points I wanted to touch on, is that for one, I was horrified to discover like just how little autonomy, like we already have in the like modern day culture around birth, little autonomy around birth within the system. But then you bring it to death, there's even less autonomy. I could not, because just to orient around a little bit of my story, I intended to have an unassisted birth and was home for 3 days laboring until I decided to transfer myself. And I was fully in my own power, made that decision myself, self-responsibility, was like, okay, my baby is communicating, it's time to go in, went in, and was told there was no life in his body, and still had to birth him. And then this is part of my body, right? Like this is my body. His body is my body. I was not allowed to take his body home with me. And I was shocked and horrified. Like, how could you tell me that it's illegal to take my baby? Like it's literally my body home. Like, it's just horrifying. And just, again, it was like a deep lesson for me in orienting to the reality of where we're at and how much work we have to do, not only in birth, but in death, and to like take our power back. And, you know, thankfully I was able to, you know, bury my son's body and return it back to the earth. And there was no chemicals, there was no embalming. And, you know, and there's really beautiful heart-centered people that have a similar vision and want to honor this sacred process. And this really beautiful couple we connected to that manage this grave site that is it's called New Mexico Natural Burial, just for anyone to reference in case it comes up in the future. I think it's helpful to connect one another, you know, and they are just beautiful humans who want to honor those of us who want to like return our loved ones
Mm,
material form back to the earth in a
mm,
natural sacred way, right? We don't want
mhm.
to contribute to the poisoning of Mother Earth. We want
Yes.
to, and again, just like I was talking about, like death always feeds life. That body that's decomposing in
Mm,
the earth is going to create
wow.
fertile ground for new life to come forth, right? Like that is
Wow.
the
Yeah.
natural cycle. And we have gotten to this place where we're so disconnected from our hearts and we're in our heads that we think
Mm,
we know better than the divine design.
mm,
And that's what's got us to here, that we need to have this war on like pests, right? We need to kill everything. Again, that's
mhm,
the death culture. We need to kill the virus. We need to kill the
mm.
pests. We need to kill to control. And
Yeah.
then we're just humbled time and time again to see like we have no control over life and death. We are simply portals, right, for these
Mm,
experiences. And the more we can like celebrate that and move towards that, the more beautiful and rich life can be, the more fully we can live when we accept death, right? When we invite
mm.
it into our lives, when we see how it's present every single day, right? With
Yes.
the sun and the moon, the dark and the light, like this, that's the reality of this dualistic realm that we live in, right? And the seasons and the cycles, or even just witnessing like the flowers coming into bloom now in the northern hemisphere with the spring, and then
Mhm.
seeing them die and that life cycle, but then new life comes forth, right, in these different cycles and seasons. And it's just so important to, again, like reorient ourselves into taking responsibility and realizing that it's in our hands, right? Like not getting weighted down by like, oh, we have no control and the government this and the government that.
Yeah.
And there's a time and place for that, right? Sometimes we have to
Yeah.
go there so we can like find the anger, that fuel, that passion, that fire to do something about it, to take action, to put an end to it, to say no more.
Mm,
I am responsible for my body and the life that comes through my body, or the death, right? Because
mhm.
surely being a woman involves life and death
Yes.
no matter what. And
So
yeah.
powerful. I know you're like, let's take a breath. Take it
Right.
all in. It's just, there's so many incredible things that you're going into because I feel like you speak my language. And
Mm-hmm.
and this the way the death piece comes in, I just feel like you bring in a level of magic into the way you speak of death, and you can feel the embodiment of it. And I'm hoping others will be able to tune in and
Mm.
really be, especially if, I know many of women that I see weekly,
Mm-hmm.
actually, there's always a death in there. There's never not, to be honest,
Sure.
whether
Sure.
it's one miscarriage, multiple miscarriage, or
Mm-hmm.
even stillbirth. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's just the reality, but it even just shows that reality of that connection, like not being scared of the word death, not, the death
Mm-hmm.
keeper, the birth
Mm-hmm.
keeper. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
as you said it, and I've said it before, is that this the embodiment of life and death and within us. But there is, pushing against at times the culture
Mm-hmm.
and what we're wanting to really embody. And this is probably why you're doing, I love that postpartum, like that vision you shared with that teacher.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's so true. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, we're all holding, of course, different energies to go. When is this happening? And I know a lot of these birth advocates I've been connecting with for more than 10 years. There's some fire. There's a beautiful fire underneath them to
No
make
doubt.
major changes, like
Mm-hmm.
even in bigger social settings of hospitals,
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
getting doulas for everybody no matter what, and just doing these different projects or reteaching breech birth or
Mm-hmm.
VBACs. I mean, I know
Mm-hmm.
there's these big advocates that do that as well, going,
Right.
okay, we're tired of it. And I love what people say about breech. It's just a, what is the word? A variation.
Variation of normal.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So
Well,
and I love that. I was like, I was breech, by the way. So I'm like
ah,
I'm all for the breech babies.
well, and I have to tell you something beautiful
Yeah,
about that, an elder
yeah.
midwife and mentor of mine talks about specifically with breech babies, is
Mm.
that like the spiritual signature of that is these babies come in walking, like they're ready,
I
right?
know. What is that? I should have been running the other way, but go ahead.
Well, and it's just such a beautiful way to like look at it, right? Is
Mm,
like, oh, they have a mission and this is their innate blueprint, right? Because
mm,
like you were talking about earlier about, during your time your mother's womb and the grief that was present, that's like your imprint, and that's oriented to the work you're doing in the world, being so close to death. And, you know, and it's beautiful to hear it in the way it's manifested for you, because it can feel really heavy, right? For a lot of people, like, oh, there was all this grief and that's how I came into the world. And that needs to be acknowledged, right? And it needs to be felt and held, but also you can see the beauty that's come from it, and like why that was the case, and how it's allowed you to touch so many lives and to, you know, help so many women. And again, like coming into this world walking or running, right? Like these babies, these souls are ready to do some big work in the world, you know, and to allow them to have that experience. And another thing I thought of too, in speaking to like the hospital and that culture, is this same mentor, which is Wapio, says that birth is the only time a woman goes into the hospital when something's going right? Because normally, like that space is death and sickness. Like that's the energy that surrounds the hospital. When something's wrong, when something's broken, when something's dis-ease, that's where you go. But birth is not that, right? So it doesn't belong in the hospital, right? Like, and it's not to say there's not a time and place. I don't want to like portray that or to villainize that. That's not the case at all. There's definitely so much gratitude for Western medicine, and there is a time and place, but it's way less than what we think. And it should not be the default. And it brings me back to something I thought of earlier, is that, like, yes, women should have a choice, but also they need to know they have options. Otherwise they have no choice. Right. And so that's a big thing I'm passionate about, is educating women. There is this, you can just stay home and birth your baby. Right? Like that's always an option, no matter what plans you have set, no matter who you've hired, no matter what, at any point, if that's what you feel you want to do, you can always just stay home and birth your baby. Your body knows how to give birth. Your baby knows how to be born. Like it really is that simple, you know? And it's not to negate the immensity of the process and all the fears and things we have to move through, because these are our deep lessons, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing. I'm all about bringing everything back home. I mean, that's my language. It's like, I was like, I don't want anyone to tell me what I need to do to my body, how my health is. I've worked really just incredible on my own health. I think when you're diagnosed with immune system issues, like a century ago, it feels like you start to become an expert on your immunity and how that works. And even, you know, now the school system, I'm like, oh, that's another system I'm leaving.
Exactly.
I've left the medical system a long time ago. I was like, I could live and be, you know, connected with the earth, fruitful, and know when there are extreme things like, oh, I think you have a broken bone. Okay, maybe we should go get it set. But you know, when it comes to sickness and disease in my reality, it's like, no, we're going to work on it. We're going to use earth stuff, and we're going to see where the body goes. And not everything is an emergency. I feel like I've known people growing up where like, I'm throwing up, I'm running to the hospital. I'm like, you're throwing up because you're like, well, maybe you just have a stomach virus. Like just wait 24 hours, like 48 hours. Like, and people are so dramatic. It's like, oh my God, you know, I have a cold, I have a fever. And I'm like, yeah, well, you're just supposed to stay home and rest. Like,
exactly. That's your body forcing you to rest.
So people would say that, they're like, oh, I was really sick, our whole family. And it's like, oh, did you know, people say, not to get in the conversation of tested, but I'm like, we're sick. We're like laying here sick, like getting better. Like, what do we have to go test for? We're not shopping and hanging. We're like, we feel like crap, like hell. We're all just laying here. It didn't change anything. That's what we would have done 5 years ago. Like we're just getting better. It's like everything becomes like everybody is a contagion. Everybody's dangerous. And coming back to that death again, it's like, okay. But coming back to that, really, I would say even the house of the body is like making those choices. As you said, it's like, oh, well, this works or that works. And the other day, I love this little side note. I had to go to acupuncture because I wasn't feeling good. I was like, I need to go get this sinus points. Give me my sinus points. And my children had to be there. And of course I put them on the little devices. I'm like, they're not going to sit there as I'm in this quiet place. And my little one was like, he was watching the needles. He wanted to take them out. And like, he helped the doctor take them out after. And I was like, wow, I had this realization that my children from the start are seeing natural medicine from the start. And, you know, Western medicine here, like we had like a twisted ankle once, but it's nothing like, oh, you're sick. mommy and daddy are going to roll out the apothecary.
Right.
Roll out, what do we got? Is it homeopathy? Is it herbs? Is it everything? You're going to rest. We're going to fluid you. And guess what? The
Right.
kids are freaking strong as hell. We don't give
Exactly.
children enough credit unless they came in with, that's a lineage thing. We'll get into that unless they came in with something.
Sure.
And but basically, I do feel like we're whole. And so I'm going, my gosh, my children get to see natural medicine. And then what will their future be? Is this something they'll be like, oh, this is what we do in our family, natural medicine? Because I didn't grow up that way. I grew up different. And so it's like, I
Sure.
feel like I'll become the ancestor someday. That's like the one that that brought it back to herbalism, that brought it back to earth.
Right.
It's fascinating to sit in reflection
Brought
with that.
birth back to the home.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, it's so powerful. And it's, Rochelle talks a lot about this too. Like, we are imprinting our children in the first 3 years of life, most like strongly, but within the first 7 years. And what are we imprinting them with? Not just with our words, but with how we move in the world, right? When they get sick, do we run to the doctor or do we stay home?
Yes.
And, reorient them that your body's so wise, it knows what to do. It's, a fever is your body's innate intelligence of burning through what no longer serves, right? That alchemical process of fire and transmuting and transforming, and we allow it to happen, and we just rest, and our bodies communicate to us, and your body is so beautiful and so intelligent, and we listen to our bodies, right? And it's such a beautiful thing to witness with children because they are so receptive, right? And you see it happening, and you see how they're orienting in the world. And then of course there's times when we see the opposite, and they're so scared and they're so worried, and you can understand and have compassion for, why older humans on the planet are the way they are, because of how they've been imprinted and how the different programs that have been downloaded into our systems. And, it's really deep work for us to unlearn and to remove those programs so that these children that are coming in, because frankly, they just won't have it, right? Like these new souls are just like, we're not doing that. Thank you for doing the work. Thank you for unlearning and deprogramming, because we can just come in and remember our divine design and who we are and the love that we are. And instead of having to go through this painful process of forgetting and coming back to remembering.
You see like some little kids that are like, over, medicated with antibiotics, and they're not, well, and then, I look at my little one, he came into this world, and I accredit it to his birth, to be honest, because we didn't wash him for like 2 weeks. That makes a huge difference, because
of course
his immunity,
the
like
vernix.
When he gets sick, it's so mild, like it's nothing. And he like, he had we all had this fever, so he was whining. He literally listened to his body, slept for 2 days. He ate, he had fluids, he whined here and there, which was so appropriate. And then he was up and running and playing like it never happened. And then my older one, he's 11, so it was more dramatic, but we were laying in bed together, and I was trying to, before my fever kicked in, I was trying to get my nervous system to help regulate him, because he gets dysregulated. And we were just listening to music. And I did say something you said, even though it started to feel my fever is coming. And I don't like fevers. They don't feel good. My body hurts, but I know it's doing its job. And so I said to my son, this was really hard for me to find that higher frequency. I said, our bodies are intelligent. I was totally chanting that. Look at, it's so smart. The fever is helping regulate, it's getting rid of all those little germies, and I'm like, it knows what it's doing. And I'm just letting her like, oh my gosh, I'm sick, but it's like, and I was like, gosh, I wish somebody would have told me that when I was little, that like your body is so intelligent, Kelly, like, and so I feel like I have to be a service to my children, just because I was so sick all the time as a kid, and I was over medicated, and whatever it is, but it was not good. And so I'm like, and it was scary. I was hospitalized at, 8 years old and IV'd. And I'm like, that's so scary. People don't realize, they think about it, being in a hospital as a kid away from your mom and dad.
It's traumatic.
Yeah. And it stays with me look at, I'm in my 40s. And so, and I remember that it was like, so for me, my kid's health is like, whoa, it's big. And so, coming back to the body, like we could keep talking forever, but about these great topics. But Leticia, I want to we're just going to kind of come to the end here, and any last words and ways that people could contact you if they're curious about, the services that you offer and things that are happening in your work.
Yes, absolutely. So I am very much so an in-person community builder. That is my lane of genius. But I do have a small online presence, I'll say, in the sense of like I have social media channels and such. I'm just not always very active on them. But my Instagram handle is Enchanted Birthkeeper. And I have a website, Enchanted Wellness NM for New Mexico.com. And I think maybe Kelly will link those in the show notes. Those,
yes,
definitely the website is the best way to get a hold of me. Of course, you can send me a direct message on Instagram. I just don't check it super regular, but I would love to connect with anyone who feels inspired, or, mamas who are walking this path of grief or looking for guidance in their pregnancy and birth. I mean, just whatever. I really am here to be of service, and just super grateful for this opportunity to have this conversation and all the places it went. And thank you, Kelly, for all the work you do and for inviting me on here. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, it was really awesome. Thank you, Leticia, for being here. And then it's great people can reach out, learn more about you, what's up and coming. And again, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you all for joining episode 139, Awakening Through the Energies of Life and Death, A Birthkeeper's Journey. If you like my podcast, please subscribe and leave reviews. Join my newsletter for meditation I have on soul-to-soul communication with baby. And please check out my book. It's a journal, Sacred Communication, a Spirit Baby journal, and Spirit Baby Oracle cards, Soul Answers from Spirit Baby. Thank you so much for joining.
This is Spirit Baby Radio. Thank you for joining Kelly in the energy of awareness, love, healing, and soul communication. Please join the next episode at www.soulbabycommunication.com.